I'll call the Ames Planning and Zoning Commission to order this evening. Your first order of business is going to need to be to appoint a temporary chair for the remainder of the meeting. The chair and vice chair are both absent this evening, so you need to appoint a temporary chair, and they will run the rest of the meeting. So I'll give it to you to do that at this time.
To who?
Cheryl, you want to be the temporary chair?
I'll be
today?
happy to. And
Do you make an official motion?
Do I need to?
I'm sure you do
Make a
need
motion? Do I need to make a motion?
Go ahead.
I make a motion to have Carol Spencer as the acting vice chair for the meeting tonight.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Good evening. First, we will start with introduction of commission members.
Anupreet Minhas.
I'm Carol Spencer.
John Emery.
Ruth Holstrom?
Then before us, we have an agenda that we need to approve.
Motion to approve agenda.
Second.
All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Aye. All right. Approval of the minutes of September 4th. Have you all had a chance to read those minutes and any corrections?
I'd move to approve as is.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain. I was absent at the meeting.
Okay. And I'll say aye also, so I believe it's approved. Public forum, this is a time in our agenda where anyone can speak on any item that is not on the agenda, but that might be of informational purposes for the commission. Do I have anybody wanting to speak on that issue? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item, which is a public hearing for the preliminary plat for Kingsbury 3rd Edition at 315 East 3rd Street. First, we'll have a staff overview of what this item is about.
Thank you. The application before you for the preliminary plat is from DET Land Company. They own a 6.91 acre site, as you see there on the screen, hatched in at 315 Southeast 3rd Street. This is just to the north and east there of Target, as you can see right off the end of Southeast 3rd Street. The request is to split the existing parcel into two lots. The split would require the extension of infrastructure, which includes the extension of Southeast 3rd Street in this case. Typically, a plat of less than 3 lots If it does not require the extension of infrastructure, it's a minor subdivision. However, this does qualify as a major subdivision, so it requires a preliminary plat in conjunction with it for the extension of infrastructure. Real quickly, just to summarize the location and some of the things involved, the land is currently zoned highway-oriented commercial. Most of the land in this area to the north, south, and west is all highway-oriented commercial. The land immediately to the east is currently zoned agricultural and is just farmed at this time. The extension of Southeast 3rd Street is required. It is in the city's long-range transportation plan. Southeast 3rd Street will eventually intersect with a future extension of Cherry Avenue, which you can see right up here in the corner, as it will come south and intersect there with Southeast 3rd Street. The developer is requesting to defer the installation of the infrastructure at this time, as there'd be a little over 150 feet of street that would otherwise be extended. There's fill that needs to be brought in, and the Cherry Avenue project is a few years off yet as far as that extension. So the developers requested to work with the city to put down security and come to an infrastructure deferral agreement that will have to be in place and agreed to prior to final plat consideration by City Council. The property is in floodplain. It is the floodway fringe. Development is permitted within the floodway fringe, provided that the development meets the flood protection standards of Chapter 9. That includes a floodplain permit as well as the proper protection, which includes fill and elevation on the property. Also, water, sewer, and electric will be provided and extended along with this extension of street. And stormwater management will be provided at a future date when the property is developed. There are currently no immediate plans to develop the property. The city does not have a site plan or anything like that. The owner is simply requesting to split the property and provide for the future extension of Southeast 3rd Street. And with that, I can answer any questions at this time. A quick look at the plat there for the proposed split.
Any questions from commission members?
I have one. I'm just curious, the property to the east that's currently agricultural, what is that shown on the future land use map as the proposed use, I guess?
The future land use is, it's a good question. I do believe it is commercial slightly to the east of here. However, there is natural area once you get a ways over into that property. Natural area is a designation on our land use map. Typically you find it in the floodplain and adjacent to rivers and creeks. So as far as if you're going toward future commercial expansion, it's possible there could be some to the east of here. But right now, yeah, it's zoned agricultural.
Any further questions? John?
Yes, Target and Walmart down there has flooded before. Since they have flooded, has the city raised up the required fill?
The current standards have been in effect. I believe they were in effect during the last major flood, and I'm thinking 2010 or 2010 when the last major flood went through. So the current standards were still in effect then. Our floodplain development standards require a minimum elevation or a minimum fill of 3 feet above the base flood elevation. So it's BFE +3. We're one of the more restrictive in the state. Typically, most often you see BFE +1 in a lot of communities, but we are BFE +3, so we require that extra elevation.
So is Target and Walmart built BFE +3?
BFE +3. I believe they are, yes. Walmart, I know for sure is. Target, I'm not exactly sure on that one.
Is the city going to revisit that? So, because they did flood.
The city periodically takes a look at our ordinances, obviously. We're always aware of any changes that FEMA hands down or the DNR. So we also work pretty closely with them to make sure that our ordinance complies with all state and federal ordinances. So it's been BFE +3 for a while now. So I see it being that way for the foreseeable future.
Even though we have the floods more often.
Correct. As of this time.
And then the other question I have, is the city going to extend High Avenue? High Street or High Avenue, or whatever it is, Avenue? Down to join up with South Third?
There are no immediate plans to right now. I believe probably never. I guess I can't ever say never, but yeah, there's no immediate plans to extend High to the south.
But the Cherry is in the plans.
Correct. Yeah, Cherry Avenue is in the plans.
When this was being reviewed by staff, were there concerns? I don't know if that staff looked at historical data in terms of aerials of the area to the east. Are there concerns regarding continuing to kind of push, like bring in fill and push more water east?
As far as historic data, I mean, the area pretty low and flat. So when it
Right.
floods, that's the area that floods first. We haven't done an analysis as far as that goes as to what the effect of future development to the east would have. No. We rely on our flood protection standards to govern that.
And as it's developed, I'm assuming like a drainage study and storm,
Yes.
that's all
Yep.
analyzed
Yep.
with the,
Yeah, that would be required at site development plan.
Justin, just for clarification's sake, could you explain how the flood fringe is different from the floodplain?
Sure.
And what the implications are for this site being in a flood fringe versus a floodplain?
So the floodplain has two basic general categorizations. There's the floodway, and then there's the floodway fringe. The floodway is the area that is susceptible to immediate regular flooding, so development is restricted in those areas. The vast majority of development is restricted. The floodway fringe is the 100-year area of the floodplain. So that is an area that has a lower risk of flood, still susceptible to flooding. And the projected depth of the water there is less, obviously, than you'd see in the floodway. So development in Ames is permitted in the floodway fringe based on our protection standards. So a lot of the commercial that you see on the east side of Duff in this area is in the floodway fringe.
So this is all 100-year floodplain then, or
Correct.
500?
100 year.
So that's supposed to flood once in 100 years. Likelihood of flooding is once in 100 years.
That is the
which-
designation given
Right.
to it by.
And I think overall, just things are changing across. It's not just Ames, it's happening across in other areas, other places too, that the likelihood of floods has increased more, which is why FEMA's gone in recently and changed some of those flood mitigation boundaries and the firm maps. I don't see anything in the proposal, and I think the proposal basically asks for, so long as it meets the requirements of subdivision ordinance and it's in compliance with all other city ordinance. I don't see anything necessarily to approve or have concerns in this proposal, but I am with you, John, in terms that we probably need to think a little bit more. It may not necessarily be, this might not be the time for it, but I do agree, and I think maybe after this, I might like to put something on record for council's sake, just that we need to go back, maybe revisit the floodplain ordinance, or maybe at least have this addressed in the comprehensive plan that's going on right now, if it needs to be a conservation area or not, or maybe look at some of those land uses as a comprehensive plan plays out in the next few months.
And I agree with you. I don't see anything pending comments from the gallery.
Sure.
That anything real bad. But I do think that Ames needs to revisit the floodplain because I don't think for the BFE 3, I don't think is nearly enough. You know, we should have BFE 5 at least because the most recent development down on the south end was Target and Walmart, and I guess there's that storage place, but that's multi-story. But they both flooded. And I remember when, I've been around Ames all my life, but I remember when the trailer park east of the river flooded. And that's why everything's up on stilts there. And if we can do some kind of recommendation to the city council for later review.
Do you know, Justin, if there's been any discussion about revisiting either the floodplain ordinance itself or looking at some of the land uses and comp plans since 2010 floods?
I know that we've taken input on it with the comprehensive plan update process. So that's something that we're still in the middle of with city council right now. So we'll see some more closer to final product on that next year, probably. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is currently updating the flood insurance rate map for Story County. So that determines these boundaries, these floodplain boundaries. That's not in effect yet, but it's under preliminary review. So once we get closer to adopting that, the city council will have to put that adoption date in the ordinance. And at that time, we'll probably just double check and make sure that our ordinance lines up with FEMA, DNR. If there's any new things that come down from them as a result of it, we'll make sure that it's updated. But I don't see that update at this point where we're at tonight would affect our protection standard. But if council decided that they wanted to revisit that at any time, they could.
Great. Any other questions, the commission?
Yeah, FEMA hasn't done a really good job on both sides of Iowa lately. So it's a concern here too.
Do we have any comments or anything that the developer owners would like to share with the commission?
My name's Doug Pyle, and I'm the owner of this property. And the purpose of coming through the planning and zoning and eventually the city was really solely for the purpose of dividing the property, that in the city's 5-year long-term plan and connecting Cherry, it would entail acquiring that, what's called that Lot A on the plan. And so that's been, the size of Lot A is the size that the city would need dedicated to them for the extension of South Third. And so we're just trying to just move ahead with that project and just accomplish this subdivision now, just because of the time that it takes to go through this process, so that when and if, in the event that we do have something to develop on this site, that would just be one step that we'd already have under our belt. And so I'd be more than willing, if it was really possible to do, to go ahead and put in the improvements. Now, I'm not trying to hold back on paying for the improvements because I don't want to expend the money right now. But if you went out there at that Lot A, at the eastern side of Lot A, it really drops down a lot. And without going over to the adjacent property owner and building his property up, there would be no way to extend South Third over to my property line, just because it drops off so fast right there. If you put it in, it'd just drop off. So it's more just because of the fact that city isn't ready to put in South Cherry and develop South Third over to it, that not willing to do that. But obviously we made arrangements to provide a letter of credit to the city so that, the money will be there whenever the city does decide to extend Cherry.
Thanks, that's very helpful.
Yep.
I did have a couple questions for you.
Excuse, sir, couple questions for you.
Just a quick couple questions.
I'm sorry.
Do you have a sense of what kind of a development that you might be interested in on these two lots? And do you have any sense of the timeline that you're looking at?
Well, I've owned this property for about 10 years now. And so I would have thought that, I would have proceeded with something faster than this, but just haven't. There's been a lot of development along South Duff, and so the demand is always to be right on South Duff. And so to find a large user for that big a parcel of ground, just, they don't come along very quickly. But I would think that it would be something that would be, that would fit the area, be a commercial use that would be advantageous to the area and to the city, and complement the other properties that are there.
Great.
Have you had any concerns with the two lots being in a flood fringe?
Not really. There's quite a bit of elevation difference even on that lot 1 that you see in the plan. If you go right across from Target, it's fairly high out there now. It's actually higher than Target right now as it exists. You go clear up to the north end of it, and it does drop back down there. I think anybody that's going to develop a property with the amount of money that you have to put in to develop a property now, they're going to want as much assurance, as you would want to make sure that their property wouldn't flood in light of what we've all seen down there in the last few years. So, whether the requirement is 3 feet, they may very, very much want to just develop it up to, a higher standard just so that you wouldn't have that problem of flooding. It's not something that any of us would want to deal with.
Sure.
So.
Thank you. Any other questions for the owner? Thank you, sir. Do we have questions or comments on this item from any of our audience?
(4002) Stonebrook Road. My wife and I own the property to the east of his property,
Okay.
the farm ground. This first time that we've ever been talked about putting that road through there. And we own all of that, where the road has to go through. So I think we need to look at a few things before we just start going ahead and doing something, because, I don't know how you are, but if something gets forced down your throat, it isn't very good. And that's where I'm coming from.
This particular item is just on the subdivision of that existing property. My sense, if staff would help me on this, my sense is that any conversations about extension of any of the streets or roads would have to be handled with the city staff proper. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. And that would be discussions that would come at a time with Public Works once that's initiated by them, so.
Would there be a contact that this gentleman could make ahead of
Yeah.
that time?
Yep,
If you'll get with the staff before you leave tonight, we'll get that for you. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, well,
You got to know where to start,
It's
right?
farm ground, and that's what we bought it for, it's farm ground.
That's right. So you need the conversation.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, though. Any other comments? Any other questions or conversation amongst commission members? And I would accept a motion on this item.
Make a motion to approve alternate 1,
Which is?
which is the Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend that the city approve the preliminary plat for Kingsbury 3rd Edition subdivision.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve alternative 1 as recommended by staff. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Are there any commission comments this evening?
It's probably not, I think I need to probably go to a comprehensive plan discussion, but to the extent that it's possible to convey some of these on record to the council, I think this item basically brought to forth just in my mind, the need to look at the floodplain ordinance and the land uses as are laid out in the comprehensive plan today, and to see what the history has been with flooding for the last few years, and bring that into the conversation as we start fine-tuning the comprehensive plan and putting out a new land use plan. So I would urge to take a deeper look at the impact, and to maybe, to the extent possible, to try and strengthen both the floodplain management strategies by looking at the comprehensive plan land uses, whether it is through adding in greenways or whatever else might be figured out at that point, and to take a closer look at the subdivision ordinance too, and see if there are any changes that might be needed to address some of these recurring flood incidents that we are seeing increased in the last few years.
Thank you.
And I wholeheartedly agree with her. You know, the flooding is just going to be worse as I see it. What used to be a 50-year flood now happens every 10 years. You know, I've seen it. And I'd recommend the city getting hold of Mr. Kepley too, because he knows how much that land floods.
Yeah.
You know, it floods a lot. And I don't think Walmart or Target was built up nearly high enough. And every time you build on floodplain, water goes somewhere.
I'm certain these concerns will be forwarded on to council, and also particularly for the Long Ridge planning activities, so that they're included. We as individuals may also want to speak to some of those planning conversations with concerns as they evolve. Any other comments? Okay. Staff comments this evening?
None.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance. We appreciate it.